I once believed technology would never betray me, until the day it was controlled by someone without a heart. When I joined BrightCore Technologies in the fall of 2022, it felt like a major leap in my career. I had just left a small startup in Portland after successfully developing an AI based consumer behavior prediction system. But what caught BrightCore's attention wasn't the complexity of my algorithms. It was the way I embedded human emotion into systems that were supposed to be soulless. BrightCore was based in downtown Seattle, a mid sized tech company trying to break into the already saturated enterprise AI market. They had strong tech but no identity. My role was to soften their models, to help the system learn to understand users like people, not just as data points. I wasn't exactly an engineer, nor just an analyst. I was the bridge between emotional behavior and machine logic, a strange, undefined role that many quietly thought was unnecessary. I worked closely with the behavioral analytics department, collaborating with data engineers and UX designers. During my first few months, I launched a small initiative. Every time an enterprise client sent feedback, I didn't just analyze the words. I extracted tone, emotional frequency, and even the time they sent the email. The results surprised everyone. Messages that seemed positive often carried signals that the client was about to leave. I called this method human insight analytics. It wasn't hard science, but it was what technology had been missing: intuition, supported by data. At that time, I truly felt I was building something meaningful. Some colleagues were skeptical, sure, but I had the support of my department head, a progressive, open minded leader. Until the parent company in New York announced a restructuring to standardize operations. We were told we'd have a new division director, Nora Vance, the woman who revolutionized data systems at two major subsidiaries. She came from Manhattan, where everything was fast, sharp, and cold, and honestly, I hoped she'd be the kind of person who could recognize the value in what I was building. The day Nora walked into the office, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Gray suit, tight bun, cold eyes. She walked straight into the conference room without looking at anyone, like the world was moving too slow for her pace. During her introduction meeting, she didn't bother with greetings. She just projected a performance chart and said, "Data doesn't need emotion. It needs speed, precision, and replicability. We're not here to guess moods. We're here to act on logic." I froze. Someone beside me gave a quick, uneasy glance. That statement wasn't just direction, it was a warning shot. Within 2 weeks, Nora rolled out a new workflow: remove all emotional tagging systems not part of the data standard, revoke my access to the client analytics dashboards, and enforce what she called absolute quantification. I was moved to a smaller desk right next to the printer. No one said anything out loud, but everyone knew I was no longer BrightCore's chosen one. I didn't react right away. I told myself, keep doing your work. The results will speak for themselves. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a difference in methods. It was a quiet war of philosophy. Should technology serve only performance, or should it also reflect human feeling? I remember the first time Nora approached my desk. No knock, no hello. She glanced at my screen. I was analyzing a client's email thread with emotional notes I had privately encoded using my own system. She stared for exactly 3 seconds, then said, "This isn't in the guidelines. Stop. Focus on the standard response metrics." Then she walked away, leaving me staring at the words on the screen. I felt a little let down during our last interaction. I turned off the monitor, and for the first time I asked myself, am I holding on to a flame everyone else is trying to extinguish? I didn't know then that within a year, that very flame would burn down the emotionless empire Nora had tried to build. And it all began with that one wrong handshake. But if you're still listening now, I'm guessing you've been through something similar. Maybe you're driving home right now. Maybe you're curled up on the couch after a long day. Maybe you're in New York, Austin, or a small town somewhere in the Arizona desert. Wherever you are, I'm just glad you're here. Because this story isn't just about me and one boss. It's about everyone who's ever been told they're too sensitive for corporate life. Everyone who's been ignored in a meeting because they chose to listen instead of interrupting. Everyone who's ever wondered if kindness still has a place in a world obsessed with optimization. If that's you, thank you for staying until now. We're about to enter the part of the story I've never told anyone before. I started to realize that what I believed in was slowly turning into a forbidden idea within BrightCore's new system. Under Nora's leadership, the department transformed into a closed assembly line. Data in, results out, no emotion, no behavioral analysis, no personalization. Every client interaction had to be processed through a standardized template, clean, sterile, lifeless, like an Excel sheet. To Nora, the fewer human variables there were, the more reliable the model became. To me, the less we understood humans, the more useless the model was. I couldn't change the system, but I could choose to keep my flame alive, even if it was just a faint spark in the night of emotionless data. So I started building a system of my own. No name, no project code, just a collection of personal notes, behavioral charts, and emotional reactions from the clients I had worked with over the months. I didn't just record when they responded, I paid attention to why they chose that moment. I didn't just measure the content of their messages, I studied their tone, punctuation, how they started their emails, and the mood hidden between the lines. What I was building, I quietly called Pulse, because it didn't just measure numbers, it felt the heartbeat behind human behavior. And I wasn't doing it alone. One evening, long after everyone else had gone home, I was still at my desk, eyes fixed on the screen, coding data sequences and extracting emotional tone from client feedback. A voice spoke behind me. "What are you working on? That doesn't look like one of Nora's pipelines." I turned around. It was Ben, a young AI engineer who had recently joined the team. Quiet, observant, and far sharper than people gave him credit for. I hesitated. "I'm trying to build a system that learns customer emotion, but don't tell anyone." Ben didn't answer right away. He walked around, glanced at my screen, studied the data for a few seconds, then nodded. "I don't think you're wrong. Our AI is great at predicting behavior, but terrible at understanding why people change their minds." From that day on, Ben became my only ally. He helped me design a simple interface, encode emotional indicators, and test how deep learning models processed effective data. We worked in silence, after hours, in quiet coffee shops, on a double encrypted private drive. I knew that if Nora found out, we could lose our jobs. But I also knew that if we didn't do it, everything I believed in would eventually disappear. Once, Ben said something I never forgot. "I don't think this is about technology. I think it's about how we choose to treat people." That line hit me hard. Because he was right. I wasn't fighting to prove a better algorithm. I was defending a way of seeing the world that, even in the age of machines, kindness and empathy still mattered. 6 months later, the prototype of Pulse was born. We ran it on anonymized feedback data from 10 former clients. Pulse not only identified who was likely to leave, but also revealed the emotional reasons behind it. Felt abandoned after last support session. Didn't receive enough updates. Communication felt too cold. Things Nora's system had never once detected. And then, something no one expected happened. A major client, Altamore Logistics, suddenly sent a termination notice after 5 years of partnership. The whole company panicked. Nora blamed the communications team, the analytics team, and even the support system, but no one could find the root cause. Quietly, I ran Altamore's data through Pulse. The result was clear. Frustration frequency had spiked 400% in the last 3 emails, especially after one message that read, "Thanks, but I guess we're talking to a bot?" I thought about staying silent, but eventually sent a short report to Nora, omitting any mention of Pulse. I simply suggested that the issue might stem from a loss of human connection and communication. Nora didn't reply. But the next day, news broke. Altamore had agreed to reconsider the contract after a personal call from the support team. I didn't receive credit, I didn't expect to, but I knew. The system we'd built in secret had just saved $1 million deal. Ben looked at me that day and said, "You realize you're about 2 years ahead of the market, right?" I smiled. "The question is, will this company move forward with us or get left behind?" Because when a flame is suppressed for too long, it will either fade or erupt so fiercely that no one can put it out. And when that happens, no one will be able to pretend it never existed. I began to sense something different in the air at BrightCore. Meetings suddenly grew shorter, colder. Emails were written in a robotic tone, so suffocating it felt hard to breathe. And Nora? She seemed to be tightening her grip on everything. She was no longer the director issuing orders from afar. She had become the one watching every move. One Monday morning, as soon as I turned on my computer, a notification popped up on the screen. All company devices are now integrated with an internal data monitoring system. Any unauthorized access to secondary servers will be subject to disciplinary action. I held my breath. Pulse was running quietly on Ben's private server. We had encrypted it carefully, but this new monitoring system could trace any unusual connection. Ben sent me a 2-word message: "Don't move." We froze all activity immediately. For days, we spoke only through short, handwritten notes, destroying them after reading. I started to feel like I was living in a world where every free thought was under surveillance. Nora seemed to sense the silent resistance. She began holding sudden spot check meetings. Every week, she would pick a few random people to review, which was really just an interrogation. One day, it was my turn. Only 2 of us sat in the meeting room. She opened her laptop and stared at me like she was about to perform a psychological dissection. "Emily, I've gone through last quarter's reports. I noticed you've been spending time on items not listed in the plan. For example, this emotional interaction section. Are you still working on that?" I drew a deep breath. "Just some extra observations. Nothing outside the scope." She tilted her head, a faint smile that held no warmth. "I hope so. We're not here to make art. We're here to do science." After the meeting, my chest felt heavy as stone. Not from fear, but from the slow suffocation of something I knew was right. I stayed late in the office. Outside, Seattle was drenched in rain. Droplets clung to the window, reflecting the cold blue glow of my screen. The same kind of light Nora saw the world in. Everything must be clean, rational, leaving no smudges. I opened an old Pulse file. Data lines still flickered, showing the charts of emotional rhythms the system had once mapped. And for the first time, I asked myself, am I trying to save something that's already doomed? The next day, Nora called a full department meeting. Performance metrics filled the big screen: number of projects, turnaround times, and response rates. Everything looked fine, but Nora still wasn't satisfied. "We need more speed. Starting today, all client calls must be limited to 15 minutes. Delete all emotional reports, personal remarks, and non-data notes. Efficiency is the only priority." A chill ran down my spine. Not because of the new rules, but because she was erasing the very thing that made us human. After that meeting, a few colleagues began to distance themselves from me. No one said it outright, but I saw it in their eyes. In the new culture, I had become the non-compliant one, the overly emotional one, the person Nora could target at any moment. Ben grew more cautious too. One day he sighed. "I'm not sure how much longer we can keep Pulse running." I nodded. "If we're forced to stop, we stop. But remember, don't erase it. Save it, even if it's just one copy." He looked at me, eyes quiet, but knowing it wasn't just an instruction. It was a last act of faith. Then the first blow landed. A major international client project collapsed. The AI system Nora had staked everything on mispredicted consumer behavior, costing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. At the emergency meeting, Nora stood in the center of the room, eyes avoiding everyone, and said, "The error came from a human variable. Someone introduced emotion into the model." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I didn't speak. I just stared back. And I realized she didn't need proof. She only needed someone to blame. That night, I sat alone in my small Capitol Hill apartment. My laptop screen stayed open, showing Pulse's log files. The code pulsed steadily like a heartbeat, patient, quiet, stubborn. In the dark, I whispered to myself, I won't let them erase this, not anymore. But deep down, for the first time, I felt real fear. Not fear of Nora, fear of the price I might have to pay if I kept going. Because when the dark starts speaking, you only have 2 choices: stay silent or become the flame. And I had chosen to be the flame. I asked myself, when you're no longer allowed to speak, will you stay silent or create a noise so loud it can't be ignored? I chose the second. After the shock of cold meetings, the distant looks from colleagues, and the veiled warnings hidden in internal emails, Ben and I knew if we didn't do something truly different, everything we believed in would be erased by the system. So we began, quietly, silently, steadily. 12 months. No one knew, not a single official record. Every evening after work, we sat there pretending to handle system error logs. But inside a triple encrypted virtual server, Pulse was growing day by day. From dry lines of feedback, Pulse learned to detect the emotions behind the words. From exclamation marks, line breaks, even the delay between replies, Pulse read the mood. Ben called it learning to hear the heartbeat of the customer. I thought, I'm raising something that can feel, not just calculate. That night, Pulse spoke for the first time. We fed the model responses from 50 former clients, emails, call transcripts, and cleaned survey data. The result appeared after 4 minutes of processing, an emotional analysis so detailed it was almost frightening. Not because it was wrong, but because it was more right than I ever imagined. Pulse didn't just predict churn, it explained the underlying reasons: emotional breaks, shifts in response habits, subtle signs of disconnection. Ben looked at me, eyes lit with real conviction. Emily, if they saw this, they'd call you a data witch. I laughed, but my throat tightened. Not because I wanted recognition, but because what I'd believed for a year, that human emotion is the most valuable data, was finally proven by the very thing I had built. An unplanned experiment had changed everything. On a Monday morning, the entire company shuttered when Altamore Logistics, BrightCore's third largest client, sent a termination notice after 5 years. No warning, no clear explanation. The support team panicked. Nora called an emergency meeting. The official AI system hadn't detected a single sign of risk from Altamore, but I felt something was off. That night, in the darkened office, Ben and I ran Altamore's data through Pulse. The result appeared after 3 minutes. Frustration index up 432% in the last 2 weeks. Emails are shifting from polite to cold. A short final line flagged in red. I guess I'm talking to a bot, aren't I? Pulse concluded the client felt abandoned. The human connection was gone. I didn't file an official report. I simply sent a quiet suggestion to the support team: try a direct phone call instead of a template email. 48 hours later, Altamore reversed its decision to cancel the contract. No one asked why. No one traced the suggestion. But I knew Pulse had just saved a $1.2 million deal. And from that moment, I had no more doubts. I looked at Ben. He said just one thing: you. No, maybe Pulse isn't just a project, it's our manifesto. I nodded, because I thought so too. We accelerated, optimized the algorithm, logged every real world example, built a live demo. I prepared everything for the upcoming quarterly review, where teams were allowed to present new initiatives. I wasn't sure the CEO would let me speak, but I knew if I didn't do it now, I'd never have another chance. I prepared for the day of reckoning. 3 nights before the meeting, I wrote the presentation script. No complexity, no theatrics, just the truth. People don't leave companies because the product is bad. They leave when they feel unheard. I printed 3 copies, one for the CEO, one for the head of engineering, and one to hand to Nora, if she gave me the chance. Ben was nervous. He said, "Once you go up there, there's no turning back." I answered, "If we stay silent, we'll just become another line of code to be deleted." And I knew. Pulse was ready. And so was I, more than ever. The quarterly meeting at BrightCore took place on a rainy Wednesday morning. Seattle's sky was a dull gray, as if the city itself knew today wouldn't be an ordinary day. The 11th floor conference room was packed. 42 people, mostly technical leads, analysts, and mid-level managers. Chairs arranged in a crescent. A wide LED screen took up almost an entire wall, displaying the dry metrics of the last quarter: processing efficiency, completed projects, and customer response rates. Everything looked fine, but no one seemed excited. Nora sat at the center table beside the CEO. Her face was unreadable, her eyes gliding over each slide like she'd seen them 1,000 times. No one dared interrupt. No one dared say anything, not already in the report, until the CEO spoke, like a final formality. Does anyone want to present an additional initiative? Any idea not yet in the plan, but with growth potential? I stood up. The whole room froze for half a second. I knew they weren't expecting anything. Some probably thought I was trying one last time before being pushed out of the circle of influence. Some were just curious. But Ben, I saw him nod slightly from the back row. His eyes were full of worry, but also shining with hope. I walked up, plugged in the USB I'd prepared. The first slide appeared, black background, white letters. Pulse. Human insight in action. A few murmurs spread. That name had never appeared in any plan. No one had heard of it. But I knew it was the soul of the past 12 months, the one thing that kept me believing technology wasn't just for numbers. I didn't present in the usual way, no heavy jargon, no flashy charts. I started with a story about Altamore Logistics, about an ignored email, about a harmless looking line. I guess I'm talking to a bot, aren't I? I talked about how customers feel abandoned, how tiny details in feedback can hold entire undercurrents of frustration. Then I spoke about Pulse, a system that could see that, a technology that didn't just measure but felt. I pressed the button. On the screen, Pulse began simulating anonymized data from 50 clients. The analysis appeared: Client 001, high churn risk, feels unheard after last support session. Client 018, medium churn risk, tone shift detected in email responses. Client 029, satisfied, received off-hours personalized consultation. The room fell silent. No more keyboard clacks. No more scribbling pens. Only the screen was glowing, alive with lines of text speaking the truths data had never dared to say. I felt a heartbeat, clear, steady. Not my own. Something larger, maybe belief. Maybe the confirmation I'd been right all along. Then Nora stood up. She walked slowly toward the screen. Her heels struck the wood floor like a ritual. For 10 seconds, she said nothing, just stared at Pulse's interface, then turned to me. Stop, she said, voice low and sharp, like honed steel. I met her eyes. I just want to show that this method can keep customers. The data is anonymized. No policy is being violated. Nora tilted her head, a cold smile curling at her lips. Not contempt, but mockery. You think this is a stage to perform your emotional philosophy? This is a company. We measure, we don't feel. We analyze, we don't tell stories. She turned back to the computer, hand reaching for the keyboard. I stepped forward to stop her, but it was too late. Right click. A dialog box appeared. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file? No one spoke. She didn't need an answer. Click. The entire Pulse folder vanished from the screen, from the company's system, at least in their eyes. I stood still. Something cracked inside. Not pain, but release. 42 people witnessed the deletion. No one spoke up. Ben wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at me, his eyes red but holding back tears. Nora turned back, brushing her hands as if she'd just cleaned up a messy desk. From today, we return to standard protocol. No more emotional drift, no more unapproved experiments. Efficiency is the only guarantee of this company's survival. Then she looked at me, voice ice cold. If you have any professionalism left, I suggest you start over and this time build something of real value, or you can leave if you feel this is beyond you. I didn't answer. I just stared at the blank screen in front of me, where a year's work had once lived. Knowing what she'd just deleted wasn't a project. It was the future BrightCore could have reached. But what Nora didn't know, 3 nights earlier, Ben had backed up the entire system to an independent server, encrypted with a key only we held. Pulse was still alive, not here, but alive, and it was waiting for a place worthy enough to be born again. I walked out of the conference room without a word. Less than 2 hours later, as I stepped through BrightCore's main doors into the rain, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, California area code. I stopped, answered. A voice came through, deep, clear, carrying something I hadn't realized I needed to hear. Hello, Ms. Carson. This is Lumina Analytics. We've heard about what you built with Pulse. And I think what they called trash is exactly what the world is looking for. I didn't reply right away, but for the first time in a year, I smiled. Because I knew everything was just beginning. The rain kept drumming softly on BrightCore's glass roof, but as I lifted the phone to my ear, the world around me seemed to hold its breath. Hello, Ms. Carson. I'm Joseph Lin, Director of Strategic Creative at Lumina Analytics. I believe you know who we are. Of course I did. Lumina was BrightCore's direct rival in behavioral AI for enterprises. But unlike BrightCore, they were famous for their technology with a soul philosophy. Their CEO's speeches at international conferences always began with a line about psychology, not about data. And now they were calling me. Joseph continued, straight to the point, no small talk. We heard about this morning's meeting, about what you presented, and about how it was deleted. I froze, silent. 1,000 questions swirled in my head. How did they know? Who told them? But Joseph seemed to anticipate. Ben applied to Lumina 6 months ago. He wasn't selected due to a lack of experience, but he left a strong impression with his vision. And since then, from time to time, he's been sending us ideas. Not internal data, just concepts, theoretical models. I exhaled quietly. So it was Ben. Not betrayal, just planting a seed long ago. A silent nod sent into the dark that now had begun to bloom. He didn't say anything specific, but today, after Pulse was deleted, he sent us an email. The only subject line, now it's time. Joseph paused, then said each word clearly. And I completely agree. His voice wasn't excited. It carried weight. The seriousness of someone who understood he was facing not just an opportunity, but a moment that could shift an entire business philosophy. We'd like to invite you to our headquarters in Palo Alto. You can name your own terms. Position, Director of Human Strategy, the person shaping the direction of empathic AI across our entire product line. I stood motionless in the glass hallway, rain sliding down my shoulders. In my mind, every image from the morning, the click that deleted everything, Nora's indifferent stare, the empty screen, was dissolving like fog before something far clearer. And you'll have full authority to develop Pulse the way it deserves, Joseph added. I didn't answer right away. Partly because I was stunned, partly because I needed to take a deep breath to close the chapter that had been cut short that morning. Thank you, Joseph. I don't know what Ben sent, but I know I'm ready. He gave a small laugh. We don't need you to bring anything from BrightCore. We know you haven't. Pulse isn't a data file, it's a philosophy. And that philosophy can't be erased with a click. The call ended quickly. Simple. No contract, no confirmation email, just a conversation between two people who understood what really mattered. I walked out of the building for the first time in 14 months without a badge hanging from my neck. Seattle was still raining, but now it didn't feel wet. It felt like it was washing away everything old, heavy, imposed, making space for something new to grow. That night, in my small Capitol Hill apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I let the glow of my laptop spill across my face. I opened a professional network page, typed a few lines. Leaving isn't failure. Sometimes it's the start of a blueprint you truly own. Then I added a small caption. Welcome to the age of empathic AI. Pulse was never deleted. It's only now beginning to live where it truly belongs. I hit post, and when the first notification appeared, Joseph Lin has shared your post, I knew that this time I wasn't walking alone. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. No email notifications, no KPI dashboards waiting for me. Just a strange stillness filled the Capitol Hill apartment, as if the whole city was holding its breath before the real storm of change arrived. I brewed coffee. The familiar smell spread out, warm, like the last marker of my old life. Outside the window, Seattle's rain still fell, thin as a curtain, but this time it didn't feel cold. The rain felt like a ritual of cleansing. I knew it was time to cut the cord. I opened my laptop, no template. I wrote my resignation from scratch, not as a formality, but as a farewell to a chapter. I chose every word, breathing out as if undoing a knot with each sentence. I hereby resign effective today. I'm leaving BrightCore not because I've lost, but because the philosophy I carry no longer has a place here. I believe technology needs not just speed, but a heart. When that is dismissed, I have no reason to stay. I wish the company success in the path they believe is right. I hit send. The screen blinked once, then went blank. Nothing left to hold me. I began packing my desk. Each item in my bag is like a shard of memory. The ceramic mug printed with, "Empathy is not a bug, it's a feature." A photo of our team from earlier in the year, laughing in front of a whiteboard full of emotion maps. A worn notebook with my first sketches of Pulse. The office felt slower that morning. A few coworkers passed by, nodding awkwardly, no one daring to stop. In a place where everyone feared being watched, silence had become the only way to show feeling. Only Ben was the same as always. He walked over, quiet, holding a white envelope. He handed it to me, hesitantly. "I wrote this a while ago. Didn't know when to give it, but today feels right." I took it, feeling it way heavier than the resignation email I'd just sent. I didn't open it yet. We looked at each other for a few seconds. No words needed. Ben's eyes held something sad, but bright, a small light at the end of a long tunnel. He said softly, "You showed me technology isn't just code. If one day you build something new, I hope I can be there, building it with you." I nodded, throat tight. "Ben, don't let them take that belief from you. You still have so much to do." He smiled, rare and genuine. "I'll keep it, and I'll keep the pulse back up, like you told me." I squeezed his shoulder lightly. "See you in a better place." I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket and turned to leave. As I reached the elevator, Nora stood at the far end of the hall. Her eyes were as cold as ever, but this time something flickered, like she wasn't used to seeing someone step out of her circle. I paused, not to confront, but to say what I needed for myself. "You're not wrong to want optimization, but you've forgotten that customers aren't data sets. They're people, and people remember feelings, not charts." She said nothing, just stared. I didn't wait. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, the sound like a single stroke of a pen, ending a long, wet chapter of Seattle rain. Outside, the rain had stopped. I stood on the steps, opened Ben's envelope. Inside was a carefully handwritten note. "Emily, I don't know where the future will take you, but I believe Pulse isn't a project. It's a way of seeing the world. I'll tell the story of Pulse to every young engineer who comes after, not to brag about an algorithm, but to show them technology can have a heart. If one day you build a new home for this philosophy, I hope I'll be there, building it with you. This time, no longer in the shadows. Thank you for not giving up, so people like me can keep believing in something good." I folded the paper gently, like folding a talisman. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not the pain of losing work, but the relief of setting down a weight and walking out from under it. That day, I didn't sign the Lumina contract right away. I spent it walking along the river, watching small boats drift by. I thought about every line of data I'd logged, every client who'd called, every time Pulse had felt the heartbeat of someone unseen. Not with regret, but to carve into my memory that everything I'd done had meaning, and it would live on, in a new place, under a new form. At nightfall, I opened my email and typed a short line to Joseph Lynn. "I'm ready." I hit send. The screen dimmed. My own reflection stared back from the window glass, calm, no longer exhausted like a month ago. And I knew tomorrow wouldn't be leaving BrightCore anymore. Tomorrow would be beginning something new. The next morning, as I walked into Lumina's headquarters in Seattle's pale dawn light, I felt something I hadn't in months. The air here wasn't heavy with pressure. Every glance wasn't a judgment, but a question shared aloud. How do we make AI understand people, not just data? In the wide, bright hall, I saw Ben. He was standing at the meeting room door, backpack slung loosely over one shoulder, eyes looking at me like someone seeing an old friend return. He stepped forward, gave me a firm nod. No words, just presence. I handed in my resignation yesterday, Ben said, smiling but resolute. They didn't stop me. I want to work with you, not as a ghost in the shadows, but as a partner standing behind the truth. I clasped his hand, feeling like I'd known this moment would come all along. No dramatic vow, just a glance exchanged. We would build something new, unlike any system before. Lumina launched the LumiHere project like a child born from empathy, not coercion. In the early days, we tested it quietly on old customer feedback. No publicity, no announcement, just to see what emotion plus logic could really do. Some of the businesses that had once been BrightCore clients remembered Emily Carson's human approach, personal messages, proactive responses. They didn't know Pulse existed, but they remembered how it felt to be heard. When Lumina reached out with its new protocol, no hype, just word of mouth, some of those clients began calling on their own. We heard there's a new team working on empathic AI. We want to try it. Those calls weren't loud, but they were enough to spread the name Emily Carson, AI that feels. Meanwhile, BrightCore tried to maintain its old philosophy. No emotion, just logic. They rolled out BrightCore Insight 2.0 with flashy ads, but customers pushed back. Dry communication, template answers, no emotional flexibility. Some small tech clients refused to renew contracts, saying, "We need humans, not imposed machines." Inside BrightCore, unrest began. The data analytics team, UX team, and several tech leads started skipping test meetings for Insight 2.0, refusing to use a model stripped of emotional depth. They whispered in private chats. We believed in the way Emily worked, even if we never knew its name. Nora, in the executive office, called emergency meetings, pushed KPIs, forced tests, and deadlines. But her meetings grew emptier. When she walked in, sometimes only a handful of people remained, looking at her like a stranger. Projects delayed, proposals stalled. She kept pretending to control, but the cracks spread in the small places, engineers refusing rushed code changes, analysts rejecting shallow models. Lumina was the opposite. We unlocked LumiHere gradually, with small partners, gathering real feedback, adjusting through human experience. Ben sat right beside me, coding, fine-tuning the interface, talking with UX about making the AI's voice sound human, not like a bot. He had stepped out of the old shadow into a creator's role, not just a learner, but a co-architect. One evening, we received an invitation to an international conference on AI and emotion. The organizers asked me to speak on When Technology Feels Human, the very theme Emily Carson and LumiHere were pursuing. When I stepped onto the stage under the bright lights, I looked toward the front row, and there she was, Nora, sitting silent, no longer a headliner, just present. She hadn't registered to speak, but she was the first person I wanted to address. I told my story. The data deleted, the philosophy denied, the way Ben and I rebuilt. Not out of fear, but conviction. I spoke about Lumina's new clients, about how the system listened to emotions once dismissed as irrelevant. I ended with a single line. You can't force empathy with power, but you can lead through emotional power that can't be copied. When I stepped off the stage, people came up to shake my hand, offer partnerships, no ads, no gimmicks. The philosophy had spread. Ben stepped up beside me, took the microphone, and thanked the engineers and UX team. Nora rose quietly and left the hall. No one greeted her. No one turned to watch her go. That image, a leader alone in a crowd with no applause, was the clearest mark of the old philosophy's collapse. By this point, Ben had officially left BrightCore to work with me, not for perks, but for belief. Nora's downfall didn't need a direct blow. It happened when people stopped believing in her. And under the backstage lights of the conference, I felt it clearly. The door I'd dreamed of building had opened. No revenge needed. The real victory was stepping through it, alongside someone who believed. The following year, under the stage lights of the AI and Humanity 2030 conference, I walked up to the podium to the sound of applause. Lumi here was no longer a trial. It was a product winning contracts, earning trust, drawing in partnerships, the current flowing exactly where I had once only dreamed it could go. They handed me the award for Breakthrough Human AI Leader of the Year, an international honor for turning empathic AI from an idea into a working reality in a cold world of data. When the MC called my name, my heart gave a small ache, because I knew I wasn't standing here just because of technology. I was here because of a belief I refused to abandon. My speech was brief. I told of my first days at BrightCore, of watching my data erased before 42 people, of building Lumi here with Ben, of how companies once thought emotion in data was fluff, but now call it a competitive edge. I spoke about the customers our system kept, not with marketing tricks, but by truly listening to the feelings beneath the numbers. I mentioned late nights with Ben, prototypes deleted, times I'd been dismissed as too emotional. And finally, I said, I'm not here to prove I was right. I'm here for everyone who's ever been told they're too sensitive for professional work. Now they have a place to shine. During the Q&A, a voice rose from the front row. I didn't recognize the face, but the voice was steady, a little trembling. You, Emily Carson, correct? I'm Nora Vance, former BrightCore executive. The hall rippled with shock. Nora stood, eyes not hard, but aware. She stepped to the mic, looked at me. I used to think you were wrong. I thought emotion was a weak disguise. Now, I realize I've limited the world to only what I could understand. The hall went silent. She didn't apologize, didn't bow, didn't excuse herself. She simply looked straight at me. All the years of being dismissed, mocked, excluded, now she stood alone before a crowd. I smiled, not in victory, but in the grace of the moment. Thank you for saying that, because what I'm trying to share isn't revenge. If I came back here to defeat you, I'd only be swapping one form of power for another. I want the next generation to see that technology doesn't need to win over someone. It needs to be heard and respected, like people do. The lights shifted from Nora's face to the audience, where heads nodded. A small clap started, then another. Then the room filled with applause, warm, genuine. Where pressure had once been, there was now recognition. After the ceremony, Ben and I stepped off stage. Outside the hall, a sea of people waited: students, fresh engineers, startup founders, tech specialists. They came to shake hands, ask for autographs, and share their stories. A young woman approached, her voice trembling. Miss Carson, I was told I'm too sensitive for my job, too. I want to build AI, but I'm afraid they'll think I'm useless if I bring feelings into it. Do you have any advice? I looked at her, remembering myself years ago, and smiled. Thank you for asking. My advice: don't carry emotion as a burden. Turn it into a tool. When technology learns to listen not just to numbers, but to moods, that's when we stop being ruled by machines and start leading them. Ben nodded, stepping forward to hand her a card. If you want to experiment with Lumi here, call us. Emily will talk to you. I looked back at the darkened stage, then out at the Seattle night, the city lights shimmering with a new future. The soulless meetings, the lifeless spreadsheets, the authoritarian efficiency projects, all of it now a trace of the past. A single line echoed in my mind. Technology cannot feel empathy, but humans can teach it how to listen. And sometimes every revolution begins with what the world once called trash. And this time I knew I wasn't alone in that revolution. Ben beside me, the Lumina team, and thousands who believed in bringing feeling into data. This was the new game I had chosen, not to retaliate, but to change how the world sees technology and humanity.